morning and welcome to worship at Silver Lake Community Church. So glad you can join us. I'm actually here on Saturday where we're having our shower ministry. I'm here with Buddy. You're going to get to know Buddy a little bit later, but we've got a lot to share about the showers. Just about a year now. Every Saturday we've been doing showers here at Silver Lake Community Church. How many showers do we do?
Anywhere from 15 to 35.
15 to 35 showers every Saturday. You're going to hear more about it later, but right now we're going to get started the way we always do, with a prayer. Will you join me? Lord, thank you so much for this beautiful morning, the chance to worship together, and we thank you for this life that you've given us. We pray that you will help us to use our gifts and our abilities well, and right now let us open our minds and our hearts to hear what you want us to hear, to be changed how you want us to change, and just to worship you. Amen. Now feel free to join us. Buddy, you can join us in worship as well, singing or being silent, standing, sitting, whatever way is comfortable for you.
God is my shepherd, I won't be wanting, I won't be wanting. He makes me rest in fields of green, by quiet streams. Even though I walk through the valley of death and dying, I will not fear, as you are with me, you are with me. The shepherd's staff comforts me, you are my feast in the presence of enemies. Surely goodness will follow me, in the house of God forever.
Shepherd, I won't be wanting, I won't be wanting. He makes me rest in fields of green, by quiet streams. Death and dying, I will not fear, 'cause you are with me, you are with me.
The shepherd's staff comforts me, you are my feast in the presence of enemies. Surely goodness will follow me, in the house of God forever. In the house of God forever. House of God forever.
because I promise I believe, O Lamb of God, I come, I come. So come to the bread of life, come to the living one, who conquered sin and death. Jesus, we come, we come. Just as I am, thy love unknown hath broken every barrier down. Now to be thine, yea, thine alone, O Lamb of God, I come, I come. So come to the bread of life, come to the living one, who conquered sin and death. Jesus, we come, we come. So come to the bread of life, come to the living one, who conquered sin and death. Jesus, we come, we come.
The shower ministry that we do here at the church, it makes me think of the story for today because there's a lot of different parallels. People who are hurting, people who are in need, folks who should help who don't, and unexpected people coming out of the woodwork to render assistance in the time of need. I want you to start off this morning by hearing from Buddy, who you saw during the opening. Buddy is a great guy who works for Shower Stop and has been really helpful in adapting their program to our facility and our constraints here at the church. So here's a little bit from Buddy.
Hi everyone, I'm Buddy Holman. I work for the Shower Stop program. I'm the fleet manager. I'm also the person who trains everyone to do everything that needs to be done. My role is not just mechanics, it's about humanity. It's about making sure everyone does what they're supposed to do with a sense of dignity at the end of the day and a sense of pride. It's how you look at the job you're doing, and it's the joy you get when you are able to help other people do something that is very simple but they can't do any other way. Showers are important because no matter where you sleep at, to be able to wash off what you feel is very important. To be able to say that, okay, yeah, I slept on the ground last night, but today I was able to wash off the bugs that crawled on me. I was able to fecal matter or whatever else I may have smelled that was still down there, I've washed it away from me. Growing up, even though both my parents are still alive, I really didn't have parents. So I had neighbors who reached out, who prayed for me, who fed me, helped me to see things differently, helped me to see things better, gave me an opportunity that I didn't get any other way. And that, coupled with having children, makes you want to make sure that they're raised right. So the people that taught me, they paid it forward, and I pay it forward.
We'll get back to the showers later, but for now, let's get to the story. The Good Samaritan, probably the most famous of all Jesus' parables. As we talk about this story today, we're going to see the central lesson, which is this. In God's kingdom, identity is nothing. Action is everything. Said differently, what a person does determines who they are, what role they play. Let's start with a story. It comes from Luke chapter 10. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, And who is my neighbor? The lawyer wanted to justify himself. Like a lot of us, the lawyer already had a way of thinking and being, an interpretation of what he thought God wanted from him, expected from him. There's this sense that he feels that maybe Jesus' behavior, remember, eating with sinners and hanging out with bad people, as well as Jesus' teaching, remember to love your enemies and turn the other cheek, that challenges somehow what the lawyer has already decided about how one should live one's life, how to live uprightly before God. Maybe he thinks Jesus will say, well, your neighbor is your fellow Israelite. Or your neighbor is the nice person who lives next door to you. The person or persons in your circle, your community, in your church, the other hardworking 9-to-5 folks sitting next to you in the synagogue on Saturdays. And that would sort of justify the lawyer. And maybe even then he would have something to say to Jesus, like, well, what about these people you're hanging out with? They're not neighborly, are they? But instead, Jesus tells him a story. Now, instead of you reading this story, I wanted to show you something that I found. I was rooting around up in the attic of the church, and I came across an old film reel, believe it or not. And it tells the story for itself. It's an incredible find, believe me. So why don't you take a look, and then we'll talk. Can you believe that was just sitting up in the dusty old attic up there? Oh my goodness, what a find. At the end of the story, Jesus asks the lawyer the question, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the one who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law answers, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Do. Action. Let's take a look at each character in the story. See what they do and who they are, and then I'm going to have a little anecdote for you. The priest and the Levite. There was a whole class of religious persons at the time. The Levites were people who traced their lineage back to Levi, one of the sons of Jacob. You remember talking about that all the way back at the beginning of 2019 from Genesis. As people who were part of the tribe of Levi, God had set all of them aside as the priestly class. And according to the Torah, these people were the ones in society whose role was to do two things. One was to help heal people, and two was to help connect the people to God. They were God's ambassadors, if you will. In all likelihood, the priest that's in the story is also a Levite. Sort of think of it like if they were to say, instead of priest, like a good, fine, upstanding pastor. And instead of Levite, say a well-behaved, law-abiding, church-going, Jesus-worshiping Christian. These are ones who, by their identity and their role, should be, we would think, the first ones to want to respond with compassion to someone who is in great need, to represent God to those who are beaten and bloodied by the side of life's road. People who, at least in theory, should be helping this wounded traveler. But who, when the rubber meets the road, have a sort of set of complex reasons why, well, we can't do that in this case particularly. We would do it normally, but in this specific case, we just can't do it. So for priests and Levites, it probably has to do with purity laws. For them, being ritually pure was very important, and the laws stipulated that they weren't supposed to come in contact with blood, and definitely not in contact with the dead body. We don't know if this person at the side of the road, seems maybe you couldn't tell if they were even alive, and so even though normally priests and Levites would want to help anybody they could, in this particular instance, probably not a good idea. The way we might see someone in great need and say, it would be a good idea for me to come in contact with other bodily fluids from other people, who knows what diseases are in them. And then, you know what, probably I wouldn't even know what to do. And someone will call 911. I'll call 911 at the next rest stop, as soon as I get a chance to, do so safely. When it comes right down to it, I am the kind of person who would help, but in this particular situation, I'm not going to do anything. I think about the shower ministry right here. Now, when we saw that the shower ministry was really working well, we and Sela tried to promote the idea to other churches around Northeast Los Angeles. And I thought that a lot of other churches were really going to go for it when they saw that the city is paying for this. There's all these volunteers who will make it happen. It becomes a great way to show the love of God working through your church in a community by meeting this basic need for people. I thought that at least some of the churches we approached would be interested in it. At the end of the day, no one was. Crickets. Some people were even kind of hostile to the idea that we would sort of put a guilt trip on them that they should do the shower ministry. They really did not want to ruffle the feathers of the community, all the risks associated with homelessness, all the politics of the community. Better to just not do it. You know what? That's your thing. We're going to do some other thing. No, while I can certainly understand that for some churches, no other churches, when the need is so great, when it's the number one public crisis in Los Angeles? I'm going to not get on a soapbox about this. Suffice to say, here's a perfect example of organizations who you would think would step up to the plate, who would say, certainly, we want to do good in the community and support and provide basic things for people. We want to be the hands and feet of Jesus to the people who are in need. But when the rubber meets the road, it doesn't matter who they say they are. They don't do anything. I don't want to say that we as a church don't have our own flaws. I'm just using other churches as an example for this particular situation. But let's talk about the Samaritan. I know we have some babies who've been born in this congregation, maybe even some adults born at Good Samaritan Hospital here in Los Angeles. The phrase Good Samaritan has basically become a byword in the culture for a do-gooder, right? Someone who goes above and beyond to help someone. Samaritans were sort of like distant cousins to the majority of Jews of Jesus' time. They had split off from Israelites around the time of the captivity in Babylon, which was about 400, 500 BC. Their religion was kind of like Judaism, but definitely very different in enough ways to make it so that both groups would have sort of forsworn the other and said that the other one was doing it wrong or had gotten it wrong in a significant way. Maybe think about it like the difference between Christianity and Mormonism, or Jehovah's Witnesses, something like that. We're like, there's definitely some similarities, but there's enough differences to make these two people not just different, but kind of at odds with each other a little bit. If you split up Israel into the north, the central, and the south, then in Jesus' time, the north was Galilee, where Jesus was from, and the south, Judea, was where Jerusalem is and where the story of Jesus climaxes. But there in the center was Samaria. Anytime you wanted to go from north to south or vice versa, as a Jew, you had to pass through Samaria. Now, the fact that it's the Samaritan that stops and helps the traveler by the side of the road would have been shocking for this story. It might not even have really made sense for people. Most of the folks, I'm assuming all of the people listening to Jesus there, were not Samaritans. They were Jews, and so they probably had some bias towards Samaritans such that they thought not only were they a different religion, but they probably were a suspect people group, not apt to big displays of generosity and charity towards fellow humans. The Samaritan's identity in the story is not defined by their race or their tribe or what place they come from or the religion that they practice or how different it might be. All of which the people listening to Jesus, as we've said, probably would have thought of as being inferior. Rather, when it's asked who is a good neighbor, it's clearly the Samaritan because of the Samaritan's actions. It's interesting that the lawyer won't even say the word Samaritan. He just says, it's the one who showed mercy, obviously. Doesn't want to begrudgingly say, the Samaritan. And when we hear this story, most of us get it, right? We understand what the point of the story of the Good Samaritan is, right? Which is that, good people are supposed to be good, aren't always the ones who help, and it's you shouldn't underestimate other people. Everyone's capable of doing great good, and certainly the story's lesson is you should be a good neighbor to other people. When you see someone in need, you should meet it. You should be a good Samaritan. We all kind of get that idea. But I want to look at the other people who are in this story, the other characters. We don't know much about the wounded person in this story. That's because who they are is irrelevant. And I think that's because there are many different types of woundedness. Different types of wounded persons lying by the side of the road. Wounded travelers. Unhoused people, folks stuck in a spiral of poverty, of addiction, family members we have who are broken, who lash out, co-workers who seem antisocial and withdrawn, friends or partners who keep their feelings from us or betray us. Whole people groups, marginalized folks who haven't had the wind at their backs the way that many of us have, depending on our families or our ethnicity or our socioeconomic class. Look, with the shower ministry here, many of the people who come to get showers weren't lying by the side of Hyperion, but they are wounded travelers nonetheless. And just as wounded travelers come in many shapes and sizes, so does the woundedness that they have inside of them. Emotional volatility may be coming out of them to demonstrate their woundedness. It might be wild mood swings, or maybe anger, resentments inside of them. That's their woundedness, or mistrustfulness, judging others, verbally abusive people, people who use extreme sarcasm all the time, risk-taking, compulsive behaviors, self-destructive behaviors, unhealthy relationships with money or with sex, people who use violence to solve problems, people trapped in substance abuse, self-sabotage, folks who have a hyper-narrative of victimization, all kinds of fear, lack of vulnerability in relationships, pushing people away, isolating, a fear of intimacy, all the different symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. People's woundedness comes in so many different shapes and sizes. If we think about it like that, I think we begin to see that there's many more travelers along the side of the road that we trudge than we might have thought of if it's only people who are literally beaten up and bloody by the side of the road. I think the story invites us to think of each other in that way, to keep our eyes open for folks whose woundedness may not immediately appear as woundedness. And just as wounded travelers and their woundedness come in different shapes and sizes, so do robbers. It's not always, I think in fact it's almost never, people with a weapon trying to pounce on us in order to take our valuables who are the robbers in life. Physically abusive parents, verbally or emotionally abusive loved ones, unfaithful spouses, unfair systems, drugs, alcohol, natural disasters, cruel twists of DNA that leave people's bodies and minds broken. Vindictive employers, manipulative, evil clergy persons. Our own spiteful self-narrative can rob us of so many good things in life. Anyone or anything that causes drama. Robbers are to be found anywhere. Almost never people wearing masks and carrying weapons. Again, if we think about it this way, we have ample opportunities to be good Samaritans for people wounded along the side of life's road, to defend people against the many different types of robbers that are out there. The message of the Good Samaritan is obvious. Jesus answers the lawyer's question with, hey, don't ask, who should I be a neighbor to? Who exactly is my neighbor? Who are they? Instead, that's obvious. Ask the question, who am I? Am I being a good neighbor to this person in this situation? Even ask myself, in this situation, is this person who seems like a robber, are they actually a victim? Maybe you notice something about the characterization in robbers and wounded travelers that I discuss, that there's overlap. The hip-hop funk reggae group that I like called Fort Knox 5, they have some lyrics that just bouncing around in my head all the time. It's this: who is to blame when the victims and the crooks can be one and the same? Said differently, hurt people hurt people. When you're interacting with someone and you feel like they're the robber, they're an aggressor, they're there to hurt you, I have found it helpful to stop and think of the person across from me as potentially more victim than perpetrator. Now, of course, this doesn't always apply, and you should certainly not allow yourself to be abused or hurt by other people. We need to establish healthy boundaries. And yet, many bad people's behavior can be explained or understood and make it easier to deal with them if you think of the fact that they're doing this because this behavior was modeled to them by someone else. I want to tell you a quick story about this, but in order to do that, I have to show you the most hotly contested piece of property on the church campus right now. So this is the wall on La Paz next to the church. This is where the current largest amount of stress for me as a pastor comes from. See, the issue is, in order to do the food pantry on Wednesdays and the shower ministry on Saturdays, we kind of had to make an arrangement with the neighbors, because obviously what we do draws a lot of folks into the neighborhood that, for better or worse, neighbors don't really want to hang out in the neighborhood. So I said, I'll make sure that no one hangs out on the property when we're not doing programs. And they said, okay, then we won't make a fuss about it. Well, this is a very attractive place to come and sit, so there's always people hanging out here on this wall when they're not supposed to be. Well, the drama right now that I had to deal with this past week is, you see that car that's over there? That person has not been wanting to toe the line of the rule to not hang out here during the day. Add to it the fact that I've caught that person smoking marijuana here on this wall multiple times. The people who live in this house right here, they have a little girl. They've had a whole bunch of crazy stuff happen with people who are here or not here for programs. And so I'm kind of like, oh, and I showed up the other day and this guy was here and I asked him to leave and he got in my face about it and, you know, started calling me a bunch of horrible names. And I was getting angry and I could feel that desire to fight coming up in me. And then all of a sudden, I just saw him as a wounded traveler. I was thinking about him like a robber, like someone who was a bad guy, a criminal, you know, smoking weed on our property, breaking our rules, trespassing. And then I just saw that he's hurt. He didn't choose to be living in his car next to a church. He didn't choose to be getting in fights with pastors. He didn't choose to be addicted to drugs. He also buys drugs from the people who are in that other van that's down the street. They didn't choose that. And probably if the same things that happened to me, that happened to him, I might be doing the same thing. Who am I going to be in this story? Am I going to be the priest? Am I going to be the Levite? Or am I going to see the wounded traveler who needs help? I calmed down and apologized for my aggressive behavior. I don't think I was being that aggressive, whatever. But before long, he and I were chatting and we're fine, and he understood my perspective. And I really tried to understand his as well. And things have been pretty cool since then. In the end of the day, me being a pastor, me being a Christian, it didn't make any difference. The difference is, what am I going to do in this situation? Am I going to see the wounded person in front of me? Am I going to stand up for the person who's being bullied? Am I going to give out of my abundance to people who need? Am I going to offer a listening ear or a helping hand to people who need it? Am I making room for people who are wounded in my life? Am I offering celebration to people who are down and out? Am I offering to spend time with people who are feeling lonely? That's all that matters. Now, what you do in any given situation, it's not always 100% clear. That's why we need to, as Good Samaritans, stick close to God, stick close to Jesus, and inevitably, Jesus will lead us into the right actions, will show us how to care for the wounded travelers in our midst. So what are you going to do?
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. In all my days, I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. Every breath that I am able, and I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend, and I will wait in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. Every breath that I am able, I will sing in the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. You give me everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. Give you everything. Goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. Every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. And I will sing of the goodness of God. And I will sing of the goodness of God.
Hey there, my name is Justin Souza, and I'm pleased to have this opportunity to share a little bit this morning. My family and I have been joining Silver Lake Community Church on Sunday mornings for the virtual services. Have been blessed by the teachings that Kyle has been offering. It's felt good for us to feel connected with a community. And we shared Advent with Silver Lake Community Church a couple of years ago, and Kyle and I have been friends for a number of years. So it's been a blessing to experience that part of worship with people that maybe you feel like you know or you feel you're connected with. We're so distant from each other, to have some form of connection with another feels good. And how fun for our kids to get to participate in this way. You just saw them on the Good Samaritan skit, Adelaide 13 and Ezra 11. My wife's name's Amy, and we have a little baby. During this time of COVID, we've been learning to practice honesty and to really cling to what we know is true. Whether it's something that is causing us anxiety or fear, naming that thing and being honest about how that makes us feel helps us to dismantle fearfulness and to disarm just an extreme amount of panic or fear that comes with anxiety. One of the things that we've really tried to practice over these last 7 to 8 months is playfulness. Playfulness looks like what you just saw earlier, looks like a skit. You can dress up and tell stories and act and be silly on camera. Our daughter and son have been making movies on their iPad with their friends, going out to the ocean and swimming and boogie boarding and playing on the sand. It can look like swimming, it can look like board games, card games, house party on your phone, right? There's plenty of fun games that you can play on your phones remotely with friends, but that act of playfulness is very much, we believe, a form of worship. As adults, we sometimes lose that, and to try to bring that back into how we spend our days, I think is useful and healthy and uplifting. And I think it's a great way to feel connected with the Holy Spirit when we can be playful. So I encourage you to adopt that as a spiritual practice. Playfulness can be a spiritual practice, and I believe that to be true. And so I hold on to that truth and encourage you to be honest with all the things that you're feeling, whether sorrow, whether thanksgiving and gratitude, whether it's being angry, but naming those things, and then also practicing playfulness in your homes, with your friends, with your family, however that may look. And I think you'll find God's blessing in that.
Remember this room? I would sit here and you would sit there and we would talk about life. When COVID hit, I thought this is going to be a pretty slow room for the next however long. But it hasn't been. This room has continued to be sort of the hub of all the things happening here at the church. We've started a new comedy night on Fridays with other ones to come. I negotiate the deals for that right here in this room. Our homeless ministry, the food pantry, the showers have all expanded since all of this has happened. All the different negotiations about that expansion happen in conversation in this room. We've had new renters. Someone came and shot a big movie here. Negotiations for that happen right in this room. 12-step groups have been really growing, socially distanced, of course, but man, we've got some really big groups, great ways for people in the community to stay sober. Those new groups and all the negotiations about COVID precautions happens in this room. This room is still busy because the church's ministry is still busy. I've even met with a couple of you, don't tell anyone else, that we've sat in here and sat far apart and even taken off our masks and had conversations because you're all going through crisis as well. And we as a church want to continue to do ministry because even when there's a vaccine and this whole thing is over, there's still going to be a need for the ministry of this church. And you all are still going to have needs. I'm going to have needs. We're going to continue to need to do ministry with each other. And I know a lot of you are taking advantage of that, and I know most of you appreciate that. Many of you have been supporting us as a church in some amazing ways. I'm so thankful for the way that you've been contributing financially to the work of this church. But I wanted to ask you as we're getting towards the end of the year to consider giving to the church financially, contributing to the work that we're doing because it's still going on and we want to be ready and healthy for when we finally get back and are able to do a full 100% ministry here in the building. We took a dip in our finances for a while over the summer, but it was okay because we also weren't using as much money on the facility. But now ministry's ramping up again, and we're hoping to see more financial support come in from folks like you. We're even hoping to start the services up again soon, the live services. But if you've been enjoying the pre-recorded services here, or if there's any other, or you want to support the ministry of this church in the community, I just want to ask you to consider giving online. And here's a couple ways that you can do that. And whatever way you can help us out, know that I and so many folks in the neighborhood, so many people who take advantage of this church are really appreciative. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for all the ways that you all have been Good Samaritans for people like me, and I just am praying that you'll have patience and mercy for the times that me and other people in your lives don't live up to the Good Samaritan role we're all called to. But we're in this together. God is moving in our hearts, in our minds, in our lives, in our families, in our church, in our community to awaken us all to see the wounded travelers around us and calling us and equipping us into the work of being His hands and feet for people who are in need. I look forward to seeing you maybe on Wednesday at the Bible study at the church. We've been doing it in person as well as on Zoom, and you can even watch it on YouTube. Stay tuned for an email about that. But if I don't see you till Sunday, until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up His countenance on you and give you peace, now and forever and ever. Amen.